Hi, I'm Mike Weaver, Minister and Pastor of GMC, Gillespie Memorial Church in Dunfermline, who are a part of the Church of Scotland, a mainline Protestant denomination in Scotland. Every May, the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland meets, and the General Assembly comprises ministers, deacons, elders from all across Scotland and other parts of the UK, Europe and further afield too. It is a place where business is discussed, worship shared, stories are told and decisions are made that impact the wider Church of Scotland. And I just wanted to take you through a few of the main points from GA 2021. Now we are a couple of months down the line and maybe consider what the implications for us are as local church. The big elephant in the room of the church, the denomination, and many churches for many decades has been decline of the church. We've seen decline in membership, attendance, young people, finance, ministers, etc. And churches across the land, across the Western world, have been grappling with this, and measures at GA 2021 have been agreed to rationalise the church in terms of ministries. By ministries, I mean people, resources, people who are trained and ordained as ministers of word and sacrament, people like me, or people who've done the training and ordination as deacons, ministry development staff, too. And as you'll see from the slide that's on the screen, the numbers are set to become 600. And what that means locally for us in the Presbytery of Fife means we have an allocation of 44.5 ministries, so made up of ministers, deacons and ministry development staff, which is down from the current presbytery plan of 68. So you'll see that's a drop of just over 24. There will also be a reduction in the number of church buildings. By that I mean halls, manses and yes, churches. But there will be a focus on mission. So what does that mean? Well, the presbytery plans are now suspended, and you may think, what's a presbytery plan? It's a document that lays out the allocation of resources. That's people, ministers, deacons, development staff, plus ordained local ministers who are non-stipendiary ministers and readers. And it allocates them across a geographical area, a presbytery, Fife in our case. So our current plan has, as I said, an allocation of 68, and that is gone and will be replaced with a reduction to 44.5 ministries in the church. The 0.5 is obviously somebody who might work a half-time post. During this time when Presbytery is looking at developing a new presbytery plan, churches that are already in vacancy will be still granted permission to call a minister as long as that is completed by the 31st of December 2021. If they haven't filled the post by then, that permission will lapse. If any church goes into vacancy during this time, they will not be given permission to call until the new presbytery plan is in place. Other things that came out of the GA. With an eye to future growth of the church, there's going to be a fund created aimed at pioneer ministry, doing ministry in new ways. And the church is promoting support for a national gift day in the harvest season, so September, October time. And any offering at the local level will wholly go to the local church mission. A couple of years ago, following one of the GAs, the old councils of the church were replaced by two new forums, Faith Impact Forum and Faith Nurture Forum. At this year's General Assembly, the Faith Impact Forum encouraged churches to engage with climate change. COP26 is taking place in Glasgow, and they're encouraging engagement with what comes out of that, what goes before and after it, and also to consider in all our planning at local level, can we get to net zero by 2030 in our buildings and ministries. And eventually, after this coming up at many a GA, The church has eventually divested from oil and gas shareholdings that it has in its portfolio of shareholdings, and it's also set up an ethics committee on investments. Kirk sessions of the local church are asked to consider our own footprint in the world and think about a just and greener future. And so that's maybe something we very much should be encouraging, not just Kirk sessions, but our wider congregation to consider how we can operate as local church in a just and green way. The ministry and mission allocation, which is the local church's contribution to central funds that pay for ministry across all churches. As a local church, you don't pay for your minister at a local area, you don't run a payroll, the central church does that. But our mission and ministry allocation goes to the central funds and then is allocated across churches all across Scotland for the Church of Scotland's work. A new model for calculating that has been developed, and it has been developed so it supports local church, financially supports presbyteries, and fairly encourages churches to participate financially in the work of all God's people. What other decisions were there? Well, the Westminster Confession of Faith is the subordinate standard for the church and its ministers. If you want to know more about it, go and Google it, look it up, what the Westminster Confession of Faith is. But the Theological Forum of the Church of Scotland are seeking comments on whether it should remain as the sole confessional standard. There are other confessions across the Reformed Church, and they're wondering whether there should be a book of such confessions. I'm really not sure on that one. But this blog isn't a time to discuss that. But they're looking for feedback. Also, theologically speaking, the Theological Forum affirmed the importance of confirmation, of profession of faith, of Holy Communion, the Lord's Supper, as essential pathways of spiritual transformation. And that's important. I think as local church we should be encouraging people who are not baptised to become baptised, to give their lives in baptism to Christ. Those who are baptised but are yet not members of the church to profess their faith, a public profession of faith, to join in communion with all God's people. And I will be covering that in a few weeks in services that I would hope towards the end of August to have a service where we can offer those who want to offer a profession of faith to come and do so. So contact me if you want more information about that. There was housekeeping around continuing Zoom meetings and alteration to meetings due to the pandemic that were necessary, and those were agreed at the General Assembly. And then, of course, we come to the annual May rummage in the theological TARDIS that is same-sex marriage and ministry. That again reared its head. I'm sad to say the Legal Questions Committee agreed wording which would allow ministers to opt in if they so wanted to conduct a same-sex marriage. We're told there are sufficient safeguards for those who will not opt in. In other words, those who will affirm the traditional stance of marriage being between a man and a woman. But we'll see what will happen in the future. This wording to allow ministers to opt in has come down to presbyteries and will be voted on in a thing called the Barrier Act across presbyteries over the coming year, and will no doubt probably be ratified at the General Assembly 2022, and will be another chip away at the notion of what the church apparently still holds to, because the church still affirms the traditional view of marriages between a man and a woman. But watch this space to see how the Church of Scotland will continue to tie itself in theological knots, attempting to hold in tension two completely opposing views. Safeguarding was again highlighted, and correctly so. We must be ever vigilant ourselves at GMC as we support our safeguarding officer, Alan Monk, but also offering to serve volunteers in this area to ensure they're trained, and we ensure we have a church that has safeguarding at the forefront of all we do. It was good to see approval of the St Andrew's Declaration. a commitment between the Church of Scotland and the Scottish Episcopal Church, and alongside this also is a new Scottish Christian Forum, an ecumenical body in Scotland covering different denominations of God's church. And working across denominations will be essential as we, as God's people, continue to try and serve the whole of Scotland. In the Church of Scotland, we are a Presbyterian church. I think sometimes the word Presbyterian evokes an idea of dourness, traditionalness, staid. But really what Presbyterian is, it's a system of governance. And so we are being encouraged as church, as Kirk Session, to engage with material being produced by the Church of Scotland about the effectiveness of these governance structures of Presbyterianism that will help us develop our mission and strategy work. It is about all God's people working in the local church on the mission and the work of Jesus Christ, of God in the world. And so I think one thing I believe is essential for the work of the future of GMC between ourselves as a Christian community and also with our community, that we need effective leadership and we need effective working. And so we will be, as a Kirk Session, looking at spiritual leadership, how we are strategic in our work, our worship, our mission. And if you have any thoughts, any ideas, anything that comes up in your prayer time, I would ask you bring it to myself, to the office, to one of the elders, that we would more as a church serve in the power of God, to serve the kingdom of God here in Dunfermline. And if you want to know more about what went on in the Church of Scotland General Assembly 2021, then visit the Church of Scotland website, where you will find lots of information freely available. So thanks for your time today, and remember, though we are part of a mainline denomination, a church with people serving across Scotland and beyond, actually you are part of a worldwide church of Christians across the globe. You are connected intimately also to the church in your local area. So join us. Be the living body of Jesus Christ, serving, living and loving God's people locally and across the world. Thanks for your time. God bless.